Fortress Earth Dreamland is the original work of Travis Hightower. All photos and artwork are either in the public domain or are accredited with permission. This work is licensed by Creative Commons. Please feel free to download and share, but do not reproduce, modify, or sell this work without the express written consent of the author. Fortress Earth Dreamland by Travis Hightower. Out of the Blue, Part 2. The E-3 AWACS is a peculiar-looking aircraft. It isn't much more than a commercial airliner with a large and powerful radar attached to the top in the form of a rotating disc. The disc is painted black with a line of white bisecting the middle, a practical paint scheme dividing that powerful sensor array into halves according to function. The rest of the old Boeing 707 airframe is painted a light gray hue and bristles with radio antennas and other sensor equipment. Orbiting approximately 60 miles north of the small and nimble fighter aircraft lumbered an AWACS of the 963rd Air Command and Control Squadron. The interior of the aircraft buzzed with activity as a crew of 30 scrambled to make sure all the assigned missions went smoothly. Towards the front of the aircraft sat 8 airmen at display consoles arranged into rows of 3. In the first row at the middle console sat a young man with his brown hair cut short so that it went spiky along the part line. He wore black wireframe glasses, which seemed to float on his lightly freckled and narrow face. His flight suit highlighted the fact that he was skinny but in good shape, and he had sheets of paper with information on the day's missions in front of him on the fold-down desk attached to the computer console. Lieutenant Jeff Andrews was fresh out of the schoolhouse, but he was grateful to be finally controlling on his own. It had been a long 2-year process to get to this point, and he really felt like he performed better without someone looking over his shoulder. He watched his viewing scope, which to the untrained eye was a confusing mess of lines, dots, and symbols representing aircraft. He could hear and see that the F-15s he was responsible for had lined up their long-range shots nicely, and with good timing. The Marines were beginning to maneuver now, trying to both throw off missile shots and confuse the F-15 pilots. The F-18 split into 2 pairs, one pair headed east and the other west. Jeff kept his pilots updated on the enemy maneuvers. Moments later, the west pair turned south, away from the F-15s, and was apparently descending. Suddenly, the altitude reading leapt back up again. "Ah," Jeff said to himself. "So that's what you're up to." Jeff had seen this trick many times before. The aircraft in the west were trying to sneak one plane in low below radar coverage, while the other remained up high. The purpose of this maneuver was to sneak the low plane into the target area undetected while the F-15s were busy. Soon, Jeff knew, the western planes would turn around and head north again. For now, he let his pilots know of the situation and directed them to take care of the planes in the east while he kept an eye on those in the west. Now Jeff was just listening for what the pilots needed. So he sat back a little and noticed something strange. They were over the ocean, but the radar was picking up an unusual amount of clutter, or false radar indications, about 80 miles to the southwest. Usually one saw this sort of thing in mountainous regions, not over the ocean, so this piqued Jeff's curiosity. Using his keyboard, he sent an instant message to his direct boss, Captain Dwayne Hicks, the senior director of the weapons section. The message was accompanied by an arrow that would appear on the captain's screen, asking if he could figure out what the disturbance was. Captain Hicks was a tall, dark-skinned man with his head shaved completely bald. He had a large nose and looked to Jeff as if he would have made an effective bouncer in a bar. Sure enough, he heard Captain Hicks ask the surveillance section of the aircraft if they could figure out what was causing the clutter. The surveillance officer, who was in charge of the section responsible for adjusting radar settings and identifying aircraft, promised she would get on it. Jeff hadn't properly met the surveillance officer because she was new to the squadron, but he reflected as he listened to her voice that she was quite pretty, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. Jeff went back to managing the intercept, yet he couldn't help thinking the clutter was very strange. Sometimes it seemed as if some of it was actually aircraft, but then the dots would jump around much too sporadically again. The F-15s were leaving their patrol now, and the lead and his wingmen were getting close to the Eastern II fighters. They would need his help again soon.
Crow 2, spiked 160 medium,
Duke announced, as a single high-pitched tone filled his ears, letting him know an enemy radar was locked onto him.
Crow 2, spike range 12, 22,000 hostile, came the AWACS reply.
Good, Duke thought. It's the same guy I'm targeted to. Duke turned hard 90 degrees to the east, knowing shots might have been fired at him, but the tone in his ear soon went quiet.
Still western contact 20,000,
announced Major Fuller. Then, over the inter-flight radios, he heard his flight lead say,
"That was a good move there, Sammy. Now pitch back in and pop this other guy."
Duke was way ahead of him. The other Hornet passed below him and to his left in a blur of motion. Duke flipped his jet on its back and felt the blood rushing to his head as he pulled back on the stick in a very high-G left-hand diving turn. He grunted loud and low in his belly to fight the effects of the pull of the earth on his body and rolled out behind the Marine.
Crow 2, tally 1,
Duke blurted, letting his flight know he had a visual on the Hornet. Duke was almost in firing position, but the Marine would not be taken so easily. Duke followed the smaller jet through a series of rolls. As he concentrated hard on staying with his target, he was vaguely aware that his flight lead was hanging back, giving him support, and that the AWACS had vectored the other pair of F-15s onto the low-flying F-18s further west. Duke barely cut his speed in time as the Marine reversed the direction of his turn. For a brief moment, this drop in speed gave Duke the chance he needed to lock on and fire. He did not miss the opportunity.
Kill eastern contact at 15,000 and a right-hand turn,
announced Duke triumphantly. The other F-18s were also killed shortly thereafter. Major Fuller declared,
Crow 1, terminate.
He was followed by
2, terminate. 3, terminate.
And
4, terminate.
Duke knew the Marines were also terminating with their controller on the AWACS. Now that he thought about it, the controller that had been talking to Duke's flight had not come back over the radio with Chalice terminate. Major Fuller had to ask the controller if he had copied the termination of the fight. This seemed to Duke to be something uncommon for this controller, who had been spot on all day so far. Duke paid it no more mind as he prepared with his flight lead to join up with the other F-15s and reset for another fight. I'm Travis Hightower, and I hope you've enjoyed this installment of Fortress Earth Dreamland. Big thank you to the many talented artists that are contributing work to this project or have allowed their art to be included. Please make a note of their names in the credits and visit their websites. Very special thank you to Lindsay Sterling for allowing her music to be included in the soundtrack. Make sure you guys check out her YouTube page, and be sure to check out her album, Lindsay Sterling, on iTunes. Stay tuned to my channel for future updates on Fortress Earth, as more installments will be coming soon.